Well, good morning. Welcome to Trinity on the last Sunday of Epiphany. We're 1 week away from entering into Lent, so I hope you're preparing yourself for your Lenten journey. This morning we look at two really great passages. Two passages where we see the yes of the Father. You might remember me telling you the story on Christmas Eve of my anxiety being a bit high for the nature of the size of the service. And just before, 30 minutes or so before I was to preach to the first audience at 5 o'clock, my dad called and reminded me that he loved me and reminded me that his yes was on me. And it was amazing. It was as if all my anxiety melted away because I knew that my dad had my back. In both the gospel reading and the New Testament lesson today, we see and hear the yes of Jesus, of the Father, his Father, on him. It's the story of the Transfiguration. We usually preach this passage on Transfiguration Sunday, and we probably will again next year. But it's also put here on the last Sunday of Epiphany, in which Jesus gets the ultimate blessing from his Father. And he invites some of his friends to join him as he receives it. Both Peter and John, which we see Peter's account in our passage, are invited to go up, to be eyewitnesses of this wonderful situation. Could you imagine? I'm pretty sure if I had been on the mountain that day and dead people showed up and white lights came on and Jesus started glowing, I probably would have soiled my britches. I would have been running as fast as I can. I mean, how amazing is this? We see a glimpse into the human side of Jesus. Jesus received the yes of his dad. Matthew 17, verses 3 through 5. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, is it good for us to be here?" I love Peter's reaction. It's one of those moments that we all have been in, right? Are you sure we are where we're supposed to be? This is getting a little weird and a little crazy, and I'm a bit uncomfortable with this. And so he says, "If you wish, I'll make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." Notice how he doesn't talk about making a tent for him and John. They're going to get out as soon as possible. In other words, let me build you guys a camp and then get the heck out of here. And while he was still speaking, suddenly a cloud overshadowed them. And from the cloud a voice came, "This is my Son, my beloved. With him I am well pleased." And this is the moment when Jesus, the Son of Man, heard the voice of the Father, Father God. And what he heard was, yes, yes. And he received a blessing. This is the moment when he is transformed from inside, the moment when his human heart could finally find peace in the chaos of the world. We tend to forget that Jesus, the man, was made of flesh and blood, and he experienced the same emotions as we do. And I believe the main reason we forget that is because there are not very many places we see the human side of Jesus. We see a glimpse of it here, but I think we see it most profoundly in the Garden of Gethsemane, in the final hours of our Lord before he is being handed over to his death. He's there praying. Mark's gospel tells us the story in chapter 14, and it says, they went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." And he took Peter, James, and John, same group, the same group that he had spent the Transfiguration with. And he says, "Guys, I need you to pray." These were his friends. These were his buddies. They were his favorite children, if you will. And he takes them along so that they could be with him. And he begins to deeply be distressed and troubled, the scripture says. There is the humanity. And he says, "My soul is distressed and troubled, overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death." He said to them, "Stay here and keep watch." Verse 35 goes on to say, going a little further, he fell to the ground and prayed that, if possible, the hour might pass. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me." In other words, he's scared. Jesus wasn't quite sure of the next steps. and he begins to second-guess the plan that was set into motion before the beginning of time. But he's afraid, and he needs to be reminded why he is doing this, and he needs to know that his Father is with him, and his yes is still remaining on him. And there in that prayer, his Father reminded him and gives him the courage to pray, "Yet not my will be done, but your will." Friends, Jesus knew he had the Father's yes, but the flesh is weak, and it needed to be reminded that God was with him and for him, and everything was going to be all right. But you know who else in the story needed the yes of the Father? It wasn't just Jesus. Peter, the rough, uncultured disciple. Peter, the disciple that reminds me most of me. There's no pretension with Peter. What you see is what you get. Peter is one of my personal favorite biblical characters because he was always up for the adventure. And he often acted before thinking. He was a shoot, then aim type guy. He's almost always mentioned first among the apostles, and he had a lot of interesting moments throughout the Bible. He was part of the great catch of fish that almost sunk their boat. He was there when Jesus fed 5,000. He was there during the great storm and was called out to walk on water. He was there when Jesus washed their feet and made them it's when Jesus made that wild statement telling Jesus, "No, you can't wash my feet, Jesus. I need to wash yours." He was there when as we read above in the Transfiguration. He was there to protect Jesus that night as Jesus is terrified within 12 hours of dying. And the Lord told him, "Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. And yet, if any of the disciples should have been completely 100% convinced that Jesus was who he said it was Peter. Peter should have known who was standing before him that day. Peter knew what was happening, and he should have known that all was going to be okay. But for whatever reason, Peter ends up denying him. You know the rest of the story. Jesus is arrested. Peter tries to cut off the man's ear. Jesus says, "Stop, this has to happen." He fixes the man's ear, and he's arrested. And Peter goes about his own way. And he's pointed out, first by a child, "That's him. That's Peter. He's the one. He's the one that was with Jesus." "No, it wasn't me." The night continues to go. Someone else recognizes him, and again he denies him. And then a third time, sitting by a fire with some other men, he's asked, "Aren't you the one?" And he says, "No, I don't know the man." And it's at that moment the rooster crows. It's loud, and it's ringing in Peter's ear. Could you imagine how he must have felt? Embarrassed. The truth was sitting right there in his face. Just 6 hours earlier, he said he would never deny the Lord, and now here he is denying him. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. And yet, what he needed more than anything in that moment was not a slapping, not a stern look from God, not a slap across the face, not a "get yourself together, man. You said you were going to be there for me." He needed love. He needed to be reminded that he was forgiven. He needed to be reminded that he was in not because he was good, but because God was good. Paul states in Ephesians 1:4, "He chose us in him before the creation of the world, warts and all, the good, the bad, the ugly." The psalmist declares that he knitted you together in your mother's womb. He made every part of you, the good, the bad, and the not so good. The ugliest parts of you, he made it. He knows all about it. Luke states that he knows the number of hairs on your head, the many and the not so many. And that, my friend, is a gift of God that's handed down to you. And because that is true for Peter, it's true for you. Peter's confession can be our confession. And that is the confession that has been a gift to us, handed down from God, which overflowed into this beautiful words. Verse 16, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Those were the exact words Peter confessed to Jesus when Jesus asked them, who do you say that I am? Who did they say that I am? And then he says, Peter, who do you say that I am? You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Let that forever be our confession. Friends, when that becomes our confession, it changes everything, because it's a confession that we never get past. As we live in this broken world that pulls us in like a riptide, our only life rope is that confession. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And as you profess that in your heart over and over and over, you will slowly begin to hear and believe the words of Jesus to his disciples in Matthew 17:8. But Jesus came and he touched them, saying, get up, do not be afraid. And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus and his amazing, perfect yes. Yes. Amen.